right, we're going to move into old business, construction manager.
Okay, let me find my page here. Give me a second, please.
66.
Now you're cut off. There we go.
You want his?
Okay.
How about buying a bigger Mountain Dews?
So, we went through the process. Proposals for the construction manager services were received on September 11, 2014. We've selected 4 companies and held interviews on September 26. That was Carrie, our architect from DLA, Joel Hatchie, our facilities manager, Mr. Walsh, Mr. Cindy, and myself.
Mr. Snyder, Mr. Sunday.
Mr. Cindy, I'm sorry. And following the interviews, the team selected 3 firms to submit fee proposals based on we wanted to do a consistent exercise to get an understanding of their fees and their breakdown of their conditions. So we used a $6.5 million construction project that we would want to be scheduled to be completed in 6 months. And then they submitted after information. After receiving the fee proposals from all 3 firms, I then worked with each individual firm to try to negotiate the best possible scenario for the district. And at the end of the day, and Mr. Cindy and Mr. Walsh will also provide some feedback, but I really felt that all 3 finalists could have served as our construction manager. All of them had experience, all of them had good resumes, incredible companies. But we finally landed on the Nicholas and Associates seemed to be the best group for us. They had the most experience with projects specific to our project. All of these firms have had some experience either working directly with Carrie or with Carrie's architecture firm, so there was some continuity there. 2 of them are currently working with Carrie on projects near here, one in Elmwood Park and one in Evergreen Park. And so at the end, we came to the decision of Nicholas and Associates. There's 3 attachments. There's a copy of their presentation and all the different stadiums, field turfs, and tracks that they did, as well as some of their background, the Nicholas and Associates fee proposal, and then just a summary of the fee proposals are in the packet. I also attached the CM AIA contract, which between the AIA contract and the supplemental contract is something like 83 pages. I wanted to get this in front of the board now as a first read so people can catch any concerns that they had. I also have our attorney, I'll make this clear that is not the finalized contract. I was on the phone for a couple hours today. I'm trying to work on retainage and some of the insurance language right now with our attorney from Franzik and with the Nicholas and Associates owner and their attorney. So other than that, I'll let Mr. Walsh and Mr. Cindy.
Just ask a real
Go
quick
ahead.
question. Has Carrie worked with the people at Nicholas who would be working on our project?
Well, that was one of the things that currently the superintendent that she's working with at Evergreen Park, that job will be wrapping up this fall, and he would be the superintendent for our project, so we thought that there was some continuity there. She also, with one of the finalists, is working with them at Elmwood Park, like I said, and so at the end it came down to fee, experience, and some continuity. I think we have a good fit. I'll let Mr. Cindy and Mr. Walsh, if they want to add.
I'll go first.
You go first.
I agree with what Kevin said. There was, as you can imagine, we've all looked at the RFPs. There was significant difference in how the firms presenting their data, and something to keep in mind. It's not like, you're going to buy a Chevy, whatever, Cavalier, and you can go to 4 different places and price them exactly. They have pre-construction, construction. Some things have the loading, some didn't. And I also give Kevin a lot of credit. He kept sending us information. We went back and they had to give a secondary responses, I think, twice, so we could get as close as we could to comparing them on an apples-to-apples basis. And I agree, any one of the 3 of them could do it. They do have a lot of experience of turf and stadiums, a little bit more probably than some of the others. And, we got, actually DLA said they've worked with all 3 of the ones that we had as finalists, so that wasn't really much of an issue either. But Kevin continued to work on pushing them to make sure we were clear on our cost and whether he could push them a little harder on reducing some of their costs, and I think he's had some additional success there. So, the one thing is there's a chart that kind of shows there's a slight difference in the cost of the two, but at the end of the day, you just can't get it quite completely apples to apples. So if you're right in a close ballpark, then you have to go by some of the subjective variables, I think, as much as the objective of what the dollars come down to. So I think, I'm pretty confident he'll work out a deal that we'll be able to sign with these guys. And the other thing that I will say, I think we learned, and maybe Kevin or Matt can further, I had a concern, I think some of us did, originally with the architect, there's certain things they would do that seemed to appear to be in their work. And then they suggested this, and I kept, if you do a Venn diagram, like there's an overlap to a certain extent. I think that we worked to see, I think there still is some overlap. I think it's not huge. And to the extent there is, they're both going to still kind of review the RFPs, it's probably a good idea because we're going to get two professionals that are taking a look, and I think it's going to help us alleviate any concerns about whether we properly vetted subs and whether we're getting a good, because that's important, what the price that we have to pay to the subs are and for the materials. So I think they were able to explain it well enough, so at least for myself I can understand that. So I think that the choice of this type of construction manager is the right choice, and I think the choice of these guys are the right guys, and assuming they're willing to negotiate with Kevin and give it, in on a few of these things. Certainly the other two we could easily switch to if we aren't successful here.
We selected construction manager as constructor. That's different from advisor. So I know there was some previous talk with the board that if we selected a construction manager, we'd have to do a new architect agreement. That is not the case because we're selecting a construction manager constructor, which is very similar to having like a GC. So this construction manager will hold all the subcontracts and basically will lead the project for the superintendent on a daily basis and for the Board of Education. And then they are responsible, they have some skin in the game. They are responsible to make sure that the subs are doing the work as designed and that the project's coming in on time and completed to the satisfaction of the shop drawings and to budget.
May I ask a question? Sorry, Matt, I know you're championing it a bit, but real quick question. There was a mention that they did not feel comfortable giving us a maximum cost at this point, which I understand it's very early. Is there some thought that at some point they will be willing to do that for us?
It's a different contract, and it would change the percentage. What I've been negotiating on all of them with is the CMC no max price.
Okay.
And the portion of that is because you really, what all three of them would said was they would bump their percentage by 0.5 point or a point, because then there's even more risk for them.
Right.
Trying to estimate exactly what's going to cost.
Well, I saw you were able to negotiate a reduction of the percentage.
Correct, on all three of them.
Yeah.
The other thing is what we're trying to, that I'm working with them on right now, besides retainage, was on, it's sad that I remember this, but Article 2.26, because I stared at it all day, is a control cost estimate clause will be in the contract so that when we reach 90% of the construction documents, so when the construction documents get to 90% finalized, they have to give us a final control estimate of what they think that those 90% completed construction drawings will cost. And if those costs come in higher than 10%, with the exception of unseen for conditions like a union strike or a trucking strike or something, then they would be, and if we have to go back and redraw prints,
They're responsible.
they're responsible to pay for the redrawings and the re-engineer. So I was able to get that in this morning, because right now, they wanted that whole clause out.
Of course.
So we were able to get that back in this morning.
I liked how we set it up. We had 4 different people tell us the difference between construction manager advisor, construction manager constructor. And all of them laid out what we really need to see. And I think one of the key things with the constructor is they made a comment, he goes, you have a small business office here. To have them do this and make sure that everything's on top of it, you're putting an overburden on. And they gave examples of schools where they, this is what we're doing for them. I also think too is that if I look at the big construction project, and hindsight is 20/20 vision, we sat down with them and said, okay, I need you to take each major project of this whole project, so the subsets of it, and be able to give us updates on where we're at cost, and be able to break it out. So where we had cement costs from one company for the big project at $100 million, there was no breakdown saying, well, this is what the pool cost is. These will be able to give us to it. And they all committed to coming to the board at least once a month, being able to provide that update to make sure it's happening right. The other key thing about it too, which I think is that so the one big thing was, we had a ventilation system at the pool. They took the hole and they shut half of it off. How are you going to prevent that? So the one scenario we used is, okay, we're putting a new roof on the locker room, this new locker room building. How do you know the flashing is all right and everything like that? They came back and said, we're going to be taking pictures. That is what we're using to show that we're working to meet what the contract states and what the specs of the contract states. So I thought it was real good talk about it. They will also have, we wanted to think about the neighbors to make sure that we kept a safe construction area. They're going to fence up, they're going to cover the fences so that there's not a lot of migration with it. They will have sweepers coming through the streets. They will dictate traffic to avoid the neighborhood area so that they're not driving through the side streets over there. They'll dictate that. They will also, make sure that the trucks aren't going through tons of mud, and so looking at that impact and what we call the QA factor, being able to make sure that was all happening right. I also think that they want to get involved as much with the architect. So how we said that, you said that they're together. It's a check and balance. So they're going to come up and say, here's the spec for that, and they're going to say, excuse us, with our experience, do we really want to do this, or do we want to go with this side, change the spec a little bit? I think that all works out for us too. So I think that accountability to the construction manager, constructor, and the accountability to the architect work to our advantage to make sure that we're getting the right project at the right price and at the right spec. So I was very impressed with it.
So what I'd ask for the board is that you take.
Kevin, can I say
Sure.
one other thing? It's a really follow-up to, because it kind of something everybody's going to ask. We also, Kevin and Matt said the spread between the percentage for this contract manager as advisor versus contractor, it wasn't very big. And we weighed that into the idea, like you said, you need more people, you don't have the people. But there was, that is it kind of looking at it as a little bit of insurance for you too, and somebody to rely on. That's one reason we weighed into that, was another reason to lean towards the constructor. And at the other end was the same. We did push them all on this max, because of course you'd love to have a cap. We felt that the cost, every one of them would jack up the cost. There was a much bigger spread at the high end between the contractor as a contract versus advisor, that you're paying a premium there, than the spread at the bottom where you were going between an advisor and a constructor. And we thought that additional cost to have some kind of protection and a guarantee on the max wasn't justified. And we also were afraid they'd be looking to try to make sure that high end cost was as high as possible. And there's a little incentive to do that. So we did weigh those considerations to kind of answer you at both ends of the spectrum. Sorry, Kevin.
Thanks.
So the board, I need, if there's any feedback or concerns with the contract, I'm working, one point that we're working on right now is retainage. Again, it was another paragraph, 7.1.6, that they wanted to pull out, and we're working on that right now. I'm trying to get retainage so that we would only pay them 90% until the project was fully completed and we signed off. So that's another one that they try to get fully pulled out, so I'm working with that right now. But if there's any other concerns or questions, the sooner you can get those to me, because I would like to have Nicholas and Associates, as well as Carrie from DLA, come to the board on the COW meeting in October. The board would discuss and approve, or vote on, I shouldn't say approve, but the board would vote on those two agreements, and have an opportunity to meet and ask any questions to that team then that we would be using going forward. And a good example of a CMC, after we went to the Village of Brookfield, and I was going to talk about this a little later, but when we went to the Village of Brookfield and we were talking about some of our, the 1 or 2 permits we might need to get for one for the locker room and the new tennis courts, and the process they go through, and then they talked about, well, if you did this, they just gave some general examples, like, well, if you possibly put this building here, or you did this here, you might not need to go for this permit, or you might not, this can come in under a different part of their zoning rules. And, so Carrie was gonna draw up some drawings of that, and she didn't know if it was gonna be cost efficient, or what that would, the different, and that's where she's like, I could start sending this to Joe, and he can give us an idea if we put something under the bleachers, what that would cost, and if they've ever done that before, and what type of codes, international building codes they've had to deal with for doing it. So I think it's good to have a second professional.
It was a very good meeting. It was the best, I think, 4 hours, 4.5 hours that we spent interviewing, so. All right, any other so the key thing right now is review what's in the packet, and then come back to Kevin as soon as possible, because we got the lawyers, our lawyers, everybody else looking. So just to make sure we got a comprehensive.
On page 70 and 71, they list their experience for the last 7 years, and they list a number of ongoing projects. When you were talking about, would they be able to do our project with all these other projects going forward? What did you learn from in that area?
So the guy that's doing the, what's his
Evergreen
You
Park.
said
The
Evergreen
Evergreen
Park.
Park is gonna come over to our job.
Is this Borg?
What?
Jeff?
Mr.
Yes.
Borg?
Yeah.
Yes.
He was at the meeting, too.
Yeah, he was at the meeting. So he's coming over to, and that'll be his whole job, is to monitor this
And when is Evergreen Park going to be completed?
This fall.
fall.
And when are we hoping to break ground?
March 1st would be ideal. We're preparing for April 1st to August 1st.
And you might want to clarify that a little. They've talked to the village. The opposite of breaking down, they'll probably let us start the demolition, regardless of what others we need earlier, if we need permits for others. So the tentative plan going forward is starting the demolition as soon as practical after the
Fall season.
season, and then be prepared. Then you're prepared to start breaking ground at a sooner time also.
Kevin, one other thing, since we've got these ongoing projects they're involved in, I'm assuming you know some of the superintendents at some of these locations. You can maybe give a phone call or two to see how things are going.
We have done that already.
Well, I
Talked to a
figured you
couple.
would be ahead of me.
And from the ones that I know, I've gotten some good feedback.
Okay, good.
I haven't,
He
of
did
the ones,
that-
of the ones I knew.
He did that for all of them before our
Yeah.
meeting. He had
Good.
talked to superintendents at schools where each one of them had done work.
Have you been to Evergreen Park?
Not yet, but I'm planning on sending Joel. But I
Okay,
did
so
send
make sure
Joel
that you
to
get
HR,
your
and that was
comments
it.
on the contract back as soon as possible.